Hello and welcome to Team Franco Bodybuilding Podcast. We are on episode number 63, and today we're going to talk about why competitors in the bodybuilding world always tend to compare themselves with someone else. And I'm going to talk about maybe not pluses of it, but more minuses, and basically why it's so human nature. As people, why we tend to compare what we do, how we look with someone else, and use that as a measure as far as progress. And you can pretty much guess that I'm going to be knocking it. But before I go into that, and also a little history to give you an idea where I come from, I just want to thank everyone again for listening. Every once in a while I get someone saying great podcast. I've learned a lot. It's helped me during my prep. And I've done, like I said, over 60 of these. So that's why I'm maybe not doing them as frequent, only because of less things to talk about. But to my surprise, I'm shocked that I haven't done anything about comparison, because specifically in the bodybuilding world, you're being judged. You're being compared to one person to another on stage. But why is it so bad to do that during your journey? And that's what I'm going to cover today. Now, a long, long time ago, when I first started working out, there was no internet, okay? So it was easier for me and easier for that generation of bodybuilders, late 80s and most of the 1990s, because even when the internet came out, it was nothing like it is today. It was just some words, forums, and really nothing as far as doing research of bodybuilding, contest results for pictures and all that good stuff. So it was in the shadows. When you worked out, you had people in your gym, that little niche. If you did, I worked out at home, so I didn't even see that. I still work out at home. But you had that niche, and you would push each other, and it would be, like a clique of just feel good. And then you would use the stage to show yourself off, and be like, this is me. This is all my hard work from the years in the gym and eating right. So it was simpler back then. I'm old enough to finally say that, yes, bodybuilding was much, much simpler in the 90s. And I did a string of shows, in my early 20s to 30s and all that stuff. And then came the 2000s. Internet started blowing up a little bit more, obviously. And, before social media, like Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, and all those other Twitter things and crazy stuff, there were opportunities to start looking up other bodybuilders. And the one source that I used when I first was introduced to the OCB was the OCB actually had a forum, and there were thousands of members. And this was like the beginning times of the OCB, from like 2003 to 2008, right around the time. And that forum basically died out when Facebook came about. It put the final nail in the coffin, because no one was on the forum anymore. But that forum, again, was that unity that you saw in the gyms back in the 80s and early 90s, where there was a lot of support. People would post pictures of themselves to get feedback. But I'm sure, and I was kind of guilty, that at that time, you would see one guy compete in the show, and they're like, oh, wow, he got first and he looked like that. Maybe that's what I should strive for, or use it as motivation and slight comparison. So I'm sure, I don't remember, but I was most likely comparing. But I would say that when you compare and you're young, I think it's a little bit normal, because then you mature and you don't compare as much. I'm not going to end the podcast with that, but that is typically in general. But I'm not saying all people my age are not comparing, because they just have that in them. And now the biggest problem with bodybuilding, and again, when I say bodybuilding, I'm covering all categories, all the women's categories, all the men's categories. It's just easier. And I talk about this in my posing class. You can nail, and you've heard me say this before, you can nail down everything. You can look at your all-time best. You can have perfect symmetry, good size, good conditioning. Your posing's on point, your tan's on point, awesome suit, and all that stuff, and you can still lose, right? I've seen it before. You see great packages, and you can still lose. Do everything right and lose. Meaning not come in first, come in second, fifth, whatever the place may be. And why is that? Well, someone else was better. Typically that is the case. Someone else is better. That is the hardest thing about this. If you want to call it a sport, call it a sport. This is the hardest part about bodybuilding because you cannot control who is going to be showing up, who is going to be judging you. So therefore, you got to learn to let go when you hit the stage. If you're confident you did all the work, again, the day before, the day of is just icing on the cake. You relax, you sit back, have a good time, meet other people, you step on stage, you kick ass, get some good pictures, and you just got to say, what the fuck, let the chips fall where they may, and if I come in first, great. Because comparison, although is the judging part, but you cannot worry about that. That is the biggest mind fuck of this whole thing, where you got to learn to let go. Now, why am I saying this? It's because bodybuilding is comparison on stage, but you can't control who else is going to be standing next to you. During the time leading up, that's when the comparisons of people will do. And that to me is not worth a penny, $100, $1 million, or whatever, to do to yourself. Because as much worrying you're doing something bad for yourself. You're setting a bad mental imagery in your head, and it's not going to be productive for you. Because the one thing that I've always say, and I tell my clients, is that we all have different fingerprints. Well, that's true. What exactly does that mean when it comes to bodybuilding? We all have different genetics, right? We have different capabilities, and that's everything in life. Growing up, I was always a fast runner. When I played baseball, I was the fastest kid on the team for a number of years. Why was that? I was working out back then, but it was genetics, because then I heard stories of my father being fast. Now my son's playing baseball, and he's the fastest kid on his team. Why is that? It's genetics, fingerprints, okay? But my father, my son, and myself can never dunk a basketball. Why? Genetics. We don't have the height or verticalness to do it. We could jump high, but we're just too damn short. So you see where I'm saying? It's genetics that plays a big, big role among work ethic, and I'm going to get into that later. But with our genetics, doesn't mean you can't improve. You take a slow runner, they can get faster, right? You take any kind of athlete, they can always improve, but it depends on how far they want to work and dedicate themselves and have the discipline to get better. So that is something why you shouldn't always compare. And then you have the case of just some people are meant to be this and some people are meant to be that. All right. So it all comes down to your fingerprints. It all comes down to your genetics. So therefore, those initial factors will determine how much your body can actually change. Now, if you have the discipline, the drive, the knowledge, give yourself the time, that is a big one for sure, you are going to be stage ready. You have the capability, because when you go to an amateur OCB show, you're going to see all types of physiques. And you're going to see all types of physiques possibly winning their division. That's the beautiful thing. Most shows are first-timers to those who are just starting out. So therefore, you may not have the most awesome physique, but it could be the most awesome that day, and you can win. That you have to keep. It's you versus you. That's the goofy part. Fingerprints, you versus you. So that's why comparison is not really going to make you better. But going back to what I was talking about with the social media and everything, it is freaking hard today. It really is. And that's why I feel bad for this generation, because we have everything at our fingertips. We can look up someone, say, oh my God, look at that look. I look better than them. Well, you may, but you know what? The show that you may enter, you may have a lot of people much better than you, okay? As ridiculous as it sounds, I've had people and I'm not calling anyone out, but people that would research show results, look back at the last 3 years, and say, "Oh yeah, this is how these people look," and then thinking they'll enter that show because these people may not look good to them, and they feel like they can be good. What does last year or the year before have anything to do with the present time the same particular show? It's ridiculous. It's because you're comparing yourself. You can't do that. You have no idea who's going to show up. I mean, not all is lost. I mean, this is not like a downer type podcast, but you got to get that out of your head because there's no benefit to comparing yourself to someone else. Now, if you use that as motivation, that is awesome. Certainly do so. You see that one bikini competitor and you think, you're in striking distance, if you put the work in and also the time because they may be 35 years old and you're 25 years old and you know that you put more work in, you have the good structure, and you're going to achieve that. And yes, you probably will if you have the dedication and the work ethic and you're going to get it done. I mean, again, I've worked with some pros who've been weight training for years. And, years ago, I had this one client. She had won the Yorton Cup. She won the big OCB show. She had it all. Okay. And basically when I prepped her, she would use me, about 4 or 5 months out. But, and she's like my age, to give you an idea. So she competed as a teenager herself in women's bodybuilding before figure even happened. And when she was winning these shows, I had, the newbie type clients, figure competitors. "Oh my God, Joe, what is she doing that I'm not doing?" I said, well, and I would just be blunt. She basically has 20 years of weight training. She does have good genetics. She works her ass off to get super lean. And that's basically it. It doesn't mean that you can't do it, but you don't know their story. Everybody has a different story. Everyone has different genes to basically allow themselves to get so far. And I think that is the hardest pill to swallow because in today's day and age, it's all at the fingertips, like I said before, and instant gratification. So you think that is the case when it comes to changing your body. That is not the case. It takes years and years and years. You can compete as a beginner. You can compete knowing that you're going to improve, okay? You use that to gain knowledge, to gain experience, and you build off of it. I'm not saying you're going to fail. It's not a failure as long as you take it and run with it and improve upon it. I mean, that's how baseball is. You fail mostly all the time, and whatever you learn from it, you move on and get better, okay? You can be successful even if you don't have the best structure or genetics. You can win shows. I've seen it. My last show that I judged, there were a couple physiques that did really well. They didn't have the best genetics, but you know what? You can tell they put the work in. They have the muscle. They got lean, and they did their posing. And they showed up, and at that day, it was perfect. Okay? So that's where comparing yourself is not going to benefit you at the end. It's going to drive you more nuts. It's going to basically spin your head out of control. I mean, especially if you're a few weeks out from a show, that's when you start panicking and be like, "Oh my God, Joe, look at this guy. I mean, he's doing the same show and, Here's another good story about comparison. About 4 or 5 years ago, I'm working with a figure competitor. She did really well in OCB and she jumped into an NPC show, knowing that, yes, some of the girls can be juiced. She goes on social media. She finds a picture of this one girl that she competed with in the same NPC show like a year or two before. Didn't look that good. It was kind of bloated, using steroids, not the right way. And she sees these bathroom photos and she's like, "Joe, she's huge now." I mean, and I'm like, you know what? And I was like, okay, so what? She looks big and good shadow in the bathroom. And I told her, that's a bathroom shot. Who knows what she's going to look like on stage? She may fuck up her peak week or do something stupid because a lot of times people they do that, whatever. So on the show day, she ended up beating her. My client won the division. And the girl that she was so afraid of because of these Instagram filtered shadow bathroom photos, was big, but she was soft and sloppy. So I don't know if she did mess up the peak week or whatnot, but that goes to my point. You look, you get yourself worked up, and you don't know what the case may even be. That's why social media is such a mind fuck, and I think it's best if you are planning on competing or if you're thinking about entering the game, use it as motivation, but never, 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 never look at someone and think, I can beat them, or I'll never be that way, or maybe my progress is not good enough. No, screw that. It all goes back to where you start and how you finish. That path, that line, A to B. And when you look off that path and start comparing yourself to others, there's no good in it. That's the bottom line. Focus on yourself, you versus you, because we all have different structures, different genetics, and we can all improve to look your all-time best. That's what it comes down to. I know it's difficult nowadays compared to the days, way back when in the dinosaur era when I was competing, because we didn't have it, and I'm grateful for it. And I went maybe through that little phase, when the internet was picking up, but then I soon to learn that if I look at other people, it's not going to make me, change my body. My efforts are within, and I don't need that external motivation. That's just me. When I work out, I go in my gym, my home gym, music loud, messed up clothing, and I just try to wreck it, okay? And then I come out breathing still. I know it's a good workout, and I know I put my effort in. Same thing with your diet. You nail your diet, the consistency's there, you make the necessary changes, and that's all you can control, is how hard you work in the gym, how consistent with your diet, and then the finishing touches of learning how to pose properly. That's what you can control, not anyone else. And that is like the biggest take-home point. Control you and don't give a shit about anyone else. Okay? So I think I'm going to wrap this one up. Again, comparison, stay away from it. If you think it motivates you, that's great. I don't object to that. But to the point of just looking at someone and saying, why am I not looking this way? Or why do they look this way? There's so many factors involved, like I talked about. Their natural genetics, their work ethic, their time. Okay, I stressed that a little bit earlier. The time of how long they've been weight training. I mean, someone who's been weight training for 10 years is going to look better than someone who's been working out for 2. So you get the idea. That is the big X factor. So guys, thank you for listening. If you have any questions or concerns, please email me at fitfranco@verizon.net. Hit me up on any social media. If you're interested in coaching, I have my website, teamfrancobodybuilding.com, and all the social media. And I'll talk to you again. Take care.